Hello, listening people.
Hello, my lord.
Hello. Bartek, how are you doing?
Good, how are you, my lord Ryan?
You are a servant, and so you must serve me, and do what I tell you. No uprising. That's not a part of the cycle.
No, Ryan, for this info, I'm your samurai,
No.
not your servant.
No, you're my servant. Don't make me grab the bows and arrows and put you in your place.
I'm a samurai!
No, that age is over now.
No, well, yes it is, but no, I'm the samurai in this scenario.
No, you're a servant. Obey me or I'll cut off your limbs.
No, I got a sword.
well, you gotta defeat me, Bartek. I got a force field.
that's not samurai.
Well, guess what? I'm making the rules up.
It's probably in Sengoku Basra.
So we are Spit and Polish Presents likingly because we are always spitting, and we both happen to be of Polish heritage. We are the entire nation of Poland between us both. I am Ryan Slawinski, and over there is my good friend, Mr. Jack Black himself,
Whoa!
Bartek.
Oh, you're really making me like the opposite of a samurai with all your words.
With
Poland and Jack Black. Like, oh.
Does Poland not have any samurais?
Probably only 72.
Okay. There we go.
That's my joke. It's a random number.
He chose a random
See,
number.
you
Did you laugh?
You thought I was going to say no or 0, but then I said 72.
Write into spitandpolish@gmail.com and let us know if you laughed at the number Bartek chose. 72. Very funny. I'm laughing on the inside, but I'm laughing nonetheless. And we are here to talk about a movie. Ooh, movies, or as they like to call them in Poland. What's Polish for movie?
I know they call them film or filmy.
Okay, so there's no difference between movie and film? Like how we have the two separate words, yet they mean basically the same thing?
You're really putting the English language on blast, Ryan.
Well, movie is about moving image, right? And film is about, like, the film is the literal thing it is put on. Back in the day, obviously, now we do digital. It's not like we call them digitals, unless you're watching digital shorts from SNL back in the day with Andy Samberg with jizz in your pants or something, but I mean, I guess it makes sense in that way. Like, there's a literal meaning for both of them, but we've just combined them both. But what is cinema in Polish? Is it still cinema because that's an inherently French word?
If you're talking about like the field in general, rather than yeah, I'm not too sure.
When you are going to a movie cinema or theater in Poland, what do you call it? Like, hey son, we're going to go to the.
Unfortunately, the person that calls me son just speaks to me in English. But I remember the shopping mall with the theater. That was the Promenada, but
like Promenade.
But I know that the theatre is like the theater for like plays, maybe.
Oh, there you go.
But I don't know if they use that same word for movie theaters.
Write in at spitandpolished@gmail.com if you know the answers to these questions that the two Polish hosts don't know.
Yeah,
but we are in the top 10 Polish podcasts.
And hurry before I write into the Google.
Before Bartek writes in himself, he's going to email us first. But we are here to talk about a movie that was recommended by you, Bartek. You recommended a film for us today.
Why did I have to do the recommendation?
Because we have a mode of transport when it comes to recommending movies. We're on a little train, and each carriage is a person's selection. You're at the front of the train, I'm in the middle, and unfortunately, like the recipient at the back of the human centipede, the listening people is at the very bottom of the train. They're not even a carriage, they're underneath.
Yeah, I'm the real shogun in the relationship.
You're the real shogun, and so you're going to die soon, and your age will be over, and I will inherit the earth. Excellent. But you recommended a feature film. What one did you give us?
I recommended the 2010 Japanese film 13 Assassins.
A remake
yes.
of a 1960s film by the same name.
Mm-hmm.
Very close in ratings as well. I had a look. They're both hovering around, was it 7.3, 7.4-ish, I think, or somewhere in there. They're near each other. So both of them have a similar amount of critical acclaim, which I found interesting. I was curious because I have no real familiarity with this particular film or the original.
All right.
So when I was googling things, there was two of them, and you mentioned the year last time, and I was like, oh, did he mention that year specifically because he knew it was a remake? Because this is a film by
It's a Takashi Miike film.
and we talked at the end of the last episode about Takashi Miike and the importance of Takashi Miike and how he's a very diverse filmmaker, a workman-like filmmaker. He is directing constantly. He cannot be stopped. No one can stop him. He has like a million films, a million TV shows, ads, whatever it is. He's directing right now as I speak. And we talked about that, but I had no clue that about much about this film other than the title, and then you said who the director was. And then when I was looking at things, I was like, oh, there's an original movie. And that did change my view a little bit walking in, being like, okay, how would this have worked in the 60s? And somebody, as somebody who has consumed some of those samurai movies from the 50s and 60s, I can definitely see how this 2010 version exists because if you shot this in black and white and reduced only some of the violence really, and the fight choreography was a little less showy, it would be very much like a 1960s movie from that time, like of that genre. It's very stripped back. The characters are all very defined types. And again, it's a story that's simple but told over a long period of time, and just has a very very casual way of going about storytelling. So you recommended this. Tell us a bit about your relationship with 13 Assassins.
So I've said a couple of times over the years that I've been meaning to check out more live action Japanese films. And in particular, I'm interested in like samurai culture and samurai history in Japan. And simultaneously, I'm also interested in checking out Takashi Miike films because, again, there has been so many. I've seen so few, and I've heard that some of them can be very extreme and they're very notable examples of Japanese cinema. So this film, 13 Assassins, which I've also heard is one of the ones that are considered, one of his best, seemed like a slam dunk, hitting all the sort of check marks that I was looking for. So that's the main reason why.
So you had not seen this before?
No. I think I said last time that I'd only seen 2 Miike films, and neither of them were particularly violent ones.
They were either comedies or what would you describe the other one, like a drama?
Yeah, like some sort of emotional drama, I think it was.
So you saw
Lion Howling in the Wind.
Yeah, you saw Ace Attorney, his version of Ace Attorney, which is just seems like a silly time all round.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward adaptation of the first game.
And then the other film you said, what was the title again?
I think it was something, it's from 2015, I think. I think it was like Lion Howling in the Wind or something like that.
Which was more of a stripped back drama.
Yeah, it was about a Japanese doctor working in Africa.
There you go. So with Takashi Miike, I've only seen one other film, and I do believe it was Audition. That's the one I know him for, and I think most people know of his work. Obviously, you do have 13 Assassins. I didn't know about it until you brought it in. The title seemed familiar, but then at the same time, there's so many titles like such and such number with such and such group, obviously seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven, and we can go on the Dirty Dozen. There's a lot of these movies where it's like, here's an ensemble of strangers and they meet up to do a thing.
Yeah, I should also say that I'm a big fan of the No More Heroes franchise, and that trilogy, tetralogy, I guess, really loves Takashi Miike, the director especially, and the characters in the games mention him a few times in the first 2, but then in the third game, which I only played just like a month ago, they have like a once a chapter like film discussion segment where they just talk about Miike and gush about Miike. So that did influence me in terms of like, putting him back in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I think, there was one where they were talking about like, what's the most fucked up Miike film? They mentioned like Audition. No, I think this. And I can't remember when 13 Assassins was brought up, but it was brought up as being one of the good ones.
Good to know. There's what's the other film he's known for?
Ichi the Killer is
Itchy
a
the
big
Killer. I
one.
haven't seen that one, but I know of it.
Yeah, the other one that I was considering recommending is called Gozu. I've heard that that one's really good, but I heard it's more of a horror, so I'm like, oh, maybe I'll save it for October at some
Spooky
point.
month. So
Even though I promised fan.
I had a feeling of what this would be about because of that title, 13 Assassins. And I thought, oh, this is going to be like a Seventh Samurai or the Magnificent Seven, Dirty Dozen type, where it's like, let's get a group of people together. Some of them are new to one another, some of them are old friends,
Yep,
and
same.
they're going to go on some quest, in this case, obviously, to kill someone in particular. And that's exactly what it is. If people
Yeah.
have not seen 13 Assassins from 2010, recommend that you do give it a watch. But the plot is straightforward and simple. There's an evil guy who's about to rise to a position of power that will one day let him be in charge of all the land. And he is very much not just a sadistic motherfucker, but he's also someone who's going to plunge Japan into war yet again. And it is up to some samurai to break their code and go against him and fight back and trek the countryside and meet up, and then it's just a lot of action. That's the story, that's the stuff. You have all of these different characters with different abilities, different skill sets, different
Yeah,
personalities.
you've got the ones on both sides, you've got the code and honor and, master servant relationships.
You got someone who isn't a samurai and his opinions on the entire thing.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed this very much. I had a great time with it. I liked it. It is so amusing that both of us have a lacking familiarity with Takashi Miike's films in actually watching them, yet his legacy is very well known in the world of cinema and even for you in the world of gaming. But I had a good chuckle at some of the things that I recognize as like Miike-isms. I'm like, hey, I know that from Audition, or I know that's a thing. As soon as the reveal of that servant girl had all of her limbs severed and her tongue cut out, I'm like, hey, that's a Miike. That's my boy,
I,
Takashi. He's
I,
back at it again.
I wish I could say that, but I'm realizing now this is the oldest Miike film I've seen.
Yeah.
Because Ace Attorney was like first year uni for us, like 2012, and the other one I already said was like 2015.
Oh yeah. I didn't realize that the Ace Attorney one was, I guess, that young. I thought
Yeah.
that was like, if you asked me when that came out, I would have said 2008. When did the first Ace Attorney game come out?
The original release of the first one, Japan only on Game Boy Advance, was like 2001.
There you go.
And then the West got it on DS, which was probably about like 5-6 years later.
Oh, so yeah, my guess was like if they made movie adaptations quicker, I was like that would have lined up pretty well.
Yeah, there was probably an Ace Attorney game that came out in like 2007.
2007. So what did you think of 13 Assassins?
I liked it too. I enjoyed it. I definitely want to watch it again because admittedly I was quite tired while watching it, so there were definitely little things I missed. But yeah, everything that I did see mixed in with my knowledge of some of the samurai history, it all came together really well. Like for me, when I say that I'm into like the Japanese samurai history, it is about the warring period that gets referenced in the film, which is the 1500s and the beginning of the 1600s. But I do understand that the feudal system of Japan that we're seeing in this film is like centuries long. And when I saw what year that the film was set in, I realized, oh, this is like near the end of the samurai era. So there's probably not going to be as many like war-hardened samurai going on about the film, and things are going to be on the decline. So with that context there, it added into, the motivations of our villain
Oh yes.
and the attitudes of some of the older characters.
There's a melancholy inherently within this We have seen this in other samurai movies or even westerns, and many period piece things where you're following a well-established group, and it is the end of the era for them. The times are changing, and what do these people do now that that's happening to them? That's literally the plot of Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2.
Butch
That
Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yes, and I was thinking a lot about recently. I had watched. I have on Blu-ray. I watched from our friend Will gave me a copy on Blu-ray of Ran, which is a Kurosawa
I've always
film,
wanted to see that one.
and that is also a similar thing of we're on the decline. But in that case, it's like peace exists, and now peace is being broken because, similarly to the villain in this movie, it's boring and people just want to feel alive again and feel important again. And that film's also a very interesting adaptation of King Lear, so that's also got that flavor to it with Ran. But I just watched that a few months ago, so when I saw this, it almost felt like revisiting that film in a lot of ways, not only just because of the time period stuff or like the similar nature of like, here's people of a bygone era trying to wrestle with it, but also just the color palette of the movie, the filming of it, where everything's got a slightly gray to saturated look, but the outfits, the ones that do have color, really pop. In Ran, everyone has a colorful outfit, so everything looks gorgeous in that way. In this film, not too many people do, only the very, very notable ones do, and then it gets covered in dirt and blood.
So in Ran, is that also 1800s?
I would have to double check the time period for that one. I can't recollect. But it is, about a dying empire, so probably, in a lot of ways. Yeah, like that whole thing. Like
definitely
I said,
Tokugawa shogunate. Yeah,
it's definitely, like I said, it's a King Lear like story. So we're following the rapid decline of a once powerful person and seeing everything around them get poisoned.
Yeah, for context, for people listening to this that might not be familiar with the era, but are at least familiar with things that we've talked about. Putting this in reference to Blackadder and probably weren't expecting that. Blackadder, and we did last year Grave of the Fireflies. Blackadder, the very first season, was set in a medieval era, and you can see similarities between that setting and what we see here in the samurai setting. And definitely that was the case when they were at the same time. But as we watch Blackadder 2 and Blackadder 3, they move forward like 100 years, and like England is clearly developing and changing. When it comes to Japan, like the 1500s to like the late 1800s, it was like the same all the way through. So even though this is like 200-300 years after the Warring States period, the setting just looks the same.
Yes, so...
And then, connecting it to Grave of the Fireflies, that's set during World War II, that's like 100 years after this film is set. So Japan has to move all the way to, military and like military vehicles and guns. It's like they had a lot of moving forward to do once the samurai era ended.
That is correct. So to answer your question, Ran is set in the late 16th century Japan. So that's when that story is.
So that's Warring States then.
Yes, but in the context of that film, like I said, it's doing an adaptation of King Lear. So it's doing that and applying it to the culture. It's kind of like when we did The Handmaiden and how that's an adaptation of an English novel set in the modern day about lesbians. And it's like, wouldn't it be interesting if we set it in 1930s Korea where it was occupied by the Japanese? And it's like,
yeah, it's probably okay. Yeah, probably then the ending of like the warring period where like just war is happening all the time.
But let's go back to 13 Assassins. What did you think of the filmmaking itself? Because I think going into it, both of us were very much aware of that more than anything else. We've talked about the director a lot, and even with the lack of what we've seen of his work, there's definitely an impression of what he is about. So getting something that I guess, at least in my opinion, was more in line with what you think of the director rather than, say, Ace Attorney. What did you think of the style of filmmaking that was present through this?
Yeah, the the samurai culture was very sincere, and knowing that Takashi Miike is famous for his stylistic depictions of violence, especially with our villain early on when we're establishing just how depraved and sadistic he is. Like, the fact that he is just willing to kill people just for, because he can, basically, that bluntness was really powerful.
I was really taken in by the stylized violence in terms of we don't actually see too much, and a lot of it is quick and to the point. This isn't Kill Bill,
Hmm.
where you're slashing limbs and blood is flying out. Like,
Yeah.
when people hear the phrase stylized violence, they may think of something like that. But there's an almost realism to the violence in this film, but it's like he's cranked up the knob one or two
Yeah.
levels. Not too much, but enough for you to be like, oh, all right. I
Hmm.
can see what's happening here. Like, for here's a great example of what I'm talking about. My favorite piece of filmmaking in the entire thing, because it comes out of nowhere, but it's so brilliantly done, is when we're having the big fight at the end of this, where every samurai is eventually dying except for the final one, or two or three technically. Like, you have two left, and then one of them gives themselves up, and then the one's left, and then oh no, the other one who isn't a samurai's back. We have one of the samurai is slowly dying, and he's on the ground, and he's crawling up, and he's resting his head on this piece of fencing, and he looks. We now see point of view of his other samurai friend fighting for his life, and then eventually dying, and we see the camera looking at it, but it's on the wrong angle, so everything looks, instead of vertical, now we're looking horizontally, and the vision is getting blurry, and we're seeing this friend of his, and this is very stylized way of showing a scene where his friend is just beating people to death with a rock. He's just got a rock in his hand and he's just
Hmm.
beating their brains in. But
It's a payoff.
since the style of filming this is so different and so abstract, it makes it stylized. But when you actually describe what he's doing, it is the most blunt force way of showing violence, of just a guy beating another guy to death. But even that, you barely even see the impact of the rock to this guy's face, because the character we're looking at, he's dying and he's not focusing on that. He's focusing on his friend's face. He's focusing on people coming towards his friend. And that was I was really taken aback by that, because it was not only just out of nowhere and it was sudden, but it really made the weight of both of these characters' deaths really important. And that was the thing that was really the key. Oh, they're going to die. They're going to die. How is each one of them going to die? And how is the film going to handle that? And some of the deaths were very noble. Some of them were sudden and quick. Some of them just died off camera-ish. Like, you kind of walk over and, oh, they're dead now. And then you had moments like this where you really feel the horrors of it all, and you feel the helplessness of it all. Like, this one's dying over, he's basically gone, and he just wishes he could help his buddy over there, but he can't.
Hmm.
Really impactful stuff.
Yeah. I really like that last scene where it was just the two guys left and they have like a casual, like sort of friendly encounter, and then one of them leaves and the other's just walking away. And, we're completely separated from all the hierarchy, relationships that we've been seeing throughout the film, and honor and the code. And you're just left with, like, is this what the samurai era was leading up to? Just like everyone is dead, all to take down this one man. Was this all worth it? It was just this powerful moment for me, yeah.
Truly. And the thrust, to go back to the thrust of the story, I broke it down, but we have an evil guy, and he's too evil, so people are asking samurais to step in, and we have our main samurai man himself, who is shown some of the horrors that this evil lord is doing upon the land, and he had a reaction that it really was unique, where he smiles. Like, he sees this horrifying image of this woman with her limbs severed and her tongue missing, and he's like weeping and crying and horrified at that. But when she writes like total massacre, he starts to like crack up and smile, and his hand starts shaking and he's also clearly upset, but then he turns around and says, like, this is what I've been waiting for. Like, I've been
Mm.
waiting for a noble death. I've been waiting for something like this. And that was when the movie got me. Till then, I was just looking at it going, okay,
We're setting it up, yeah.
we're setting things up. That evil guy is really evil, and we're meeting our characters. But that there, I just went, if this is going to be what the film is going to be like for the rest of it, I'm going to have a marvelous time. And I really did. All of those characters, the one who is known for doing fencing, he's never killed anyone before. He was an enjoyable character, and how he bonded with the other guy who is the last remaining one, the nephew, who's the gambler, and just they're bonding over stuff. It's like, oh yeah, killing a person, right? Oh, it's crazy. And then you had the one guy who just has a spear. That's his choice, but he also wants money. He wants to be paid. They were really good at establishing a lot of the characters. What was it like for you, the early stages of the movie? What was some of the moments early on that just kind of hooked you in with this?
Well, I was gonna go into about the villain himself. As you said here, he's a very depraved, violent man, just completely evil bastard. And if I was if I was told that before I walked into the film, I would, jump into my head to like, oh, okay, he's like the evil tyrant, violent man, just can't be stopped. He like walks in rivers of blood, things like that. But what he actually is this sort of, I guess, more mundane but intense evil where he's a person who by his very nature is just not a good person.
Mm.
And because of his family ties, he's put into a position of power where he can get away with things, and all of the servants that he has are following this code where it's all for my master. What my master says goes. And it's like he's hit the jackpot. He's this type of person with this type of immunity, and he can get away with anything. And even when he's doing the most depraved things, it's not like he's laughing for joy. It's just like comes naturally to him. It's just such a simple type of evil that hits so powerfully because of all the elements that are at play. And then, yeah, as we develop the film and he starts to see like more intense dangers to his own life, and seeing what battle is actually like, then this desire to like, I'm going to try to, restart the era of war, it just nails it so well.
He was a villain that is clearly mentally unwell, and that is a given. And what you're going through is very correct. If you haven't seen this and you hear like this is a villain that cuts off people's heads and kicks it like a soccer ball, you're expecting a very melodramatic Machiavellian type, over the top,
Caligula-y,
a Caligula type. That's exactly right. And
or a Cartagia.
Instead, a Babylon 5 reference, but instead he has a very somber tone to him. Everything is just a given in his perspective. They're servants. They have to be reminded that they serve. And so I kill a few of them every now and then to instill fear and remind them of their place. And he doesn't say it with a gleeful smile and he's laughing. He just says it like that's a matter of fact. And a scene that really was unnerving for me, and he has so many things that he does on and off screen that would very much upset viewers. If you are squeamish, this isn't the movie for you. But the thing that upset me the most was it was a scene with no real dialogue until the very end, and it didn't matter. But we are panning across outside, looking into his room, and we're seeing him through the like the blinds or whatever, the sheets and the walls, and he's pouring all of his food out. He has all of his food, and he has the chopsticks. He has everything neatly arranged as is traditional, and he just starts grabbing it with his hands and just throwing it in the middle of the table and making it into a big pile of slop. And then he just starts eating it like an animal. Like he just puts his face in it and just starts devouring it, and he doesn't, like, from the little we can see of his face, because again we're obscured partially, he doesn't look happy, he doesn't look sad, he just is doing it. And then he asks for, give me 2 women tonight. That was a sequence where I just went, ugh, I don't like this guy at all. I really don't like this guy.
He's not my friend.
He's a little freak. He's an animal. That's what they really want you to know. He's inhuman. And he was a good antagonist. And when you look back at it, he's barely in the movie. There's long stretches where we don't spend any time with him.
I can believe that, honestly. But yeah, it just feels like he was there pretty frequently.
He makes his mark well known. And when I was looking at it yesterday, the thing that I really started to appreciate about the filmmaking in 13 Assassins was when we would cut to different locations, the color palette would change. So when we were with our samurais and they're about to leave and they get attacked for the first time by those drunken Ronins, and then when we would cut away to the other samurais that they sent over to strike up a bargain with the town that they were going to set up for the trap, and they gave him the mayor of the town all of that money. You remember that sequence where they give him all the money and the guy's like, yeah!
Yeah, he thought that they were there to like wreck it or something, yeah.
The color palette was different because they're in different locations, and that's just a simple trick, but it's really good for us, the viewer, to be able to differentiate distance for things. And so when we do cut to the bad guy and he's traveling in the in-betweens of those, we could actually see just through the colors of the scenes as we progress, he's getting closer to where the town is. I thought that was good. It was neat.
A lot of really neat things going on, yeah. We had about 2 ritual suicides in the film.
Did you love that?
Oh, it was great, yeah. The film opened on one.
Yes, it did. That's how you know you're watching a Japanese samurai movie. It has a classic ritual suicide.
Even at the end of that era.
Yeah.
Like, you always have that thing about, like, oh, how upsetting would it be to be the last soldier to have died in World War II? It's like, how upsetting would it be to have committed harakiri within, like, the last 3 decades or something?
Well, that is true. Well, who was your favorite character out of our 13 assassins, that is?
Honestly, I'd have to rewatch the film to really be able to answer that. It was a little bit tricky for me to follow a lot of them, but one that was really distinctive was the 13th one, the last one that joins, because he's just kind of the odd one out. He's a hunter who potentially is supernatural in some way because he doesn't seem to be able to be hurt.
And he fucks real hard.
And he fucks very, very hard. All the women are tired. They went through hell. And yeah, just that very, as powerful as I just said that scene was, just the way he gets himself into that moment of like, oh, man, that was a tough battle. He's like, oh, you're okay? Yeah, I'm totally fine.
Yeah, just a minor injury. He points to a different location to what we saw him get hurt with, which was through the neck. He points at like his lower abdomen and he's like,
yeah. I think I'm gonna travel to America. And again, that really highlights the international context of like, oh yeah, America exists
with all of their technology. And...
yeah, at this point, mid 1800s, probably Wild Westy era.
Yeah, maybe, but I really liked. Yeah, it's hard. It's always hard because there's 13 characters, but most of them you don't get to know. You just get their quirks. This guy has a spear and he wants money because he's going to spend it on these things, and then he thanks them right before he's going to jump into battle for the like buying his soul or spirit, and it was a good price.
I like that one where he was like listing out what he's going to do with all the money. It's like, okay, he's got noble reasons and he's got luxury reasons.
And we had the young guy, the young kid who was a fencer. That was his talent. He was fencing, and The main samurai that we have as a character, like the head of it all,
Yeah.
he dismissed. It was very dismissive. He's like, no, he's too young. And then my personal favorite samurai, like his right hand man, who was a bit older, and he was the one that they sent off to go inform. They pay for the village that they were going to use as the ambush for the evil lord, but also he was the one that went off ahead to inform that other group about the lord coming this direction, so they could block him at the bridge because he
Mhm.
had killed their daughter, like that guy's daughter. So, but like
Yeah, daughter-in-law and son.
daughter-in-law and son, I he
Monkey
that
bones are hard to break.
yes, that character, the one they sent off, I really liked him. He was just what I imagine like a classic samurai to be. He was noble and wise, and he had a little bit of humor, but he was still very stoic. And he had a really great death as well in the movie, where he was just walking up to the Lord and people were just coming at him, and he was like slashing them, slash, 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 and he was just still insulting this Lord character, and people were gathering up behind him, and he was just looking around like, okay, here's where I go out. I'm just going to keep walking over. And then they just push him into the side of a house and stab him a bunch. But I really liked his character. He was one of my favorites because when you're going into a samurai movie, you have an idea of what samurai characters are like, and he was just the archetype for me.
Okay, for me, it was actually the guy on the other side, the Hanbei, I think his name was, the strategist under Naritsugu, who's the lord. Because he was the one who, we're introduced to him, and he is completely disgusted by what his lord is doing, but he's got the code, so he has to approve of it. He has to enable it. That's a word I should have used before. Like the lord's in a situation that enables his evilness, and he fights sincerely for it the entire time, even though he is not approving of it. He even is the one that's being told about, like, I think I'm gonna start the era of war all over again, and he still has to go through with it. And even to his last breath, like, they have the fight with his counterpart on the good side, Sazaimon or something.
Yeah.
And he dies, noble death, and he's being treated with respect by our hero. And then, as you said before, his head gets kicked by a soccer ball, and our hero's just like, how could you disrespect a great man like this?
He gave his life for you. And the response is, well, you can kick my head all you like. Because the Lord, the villain, he seemingly has no fear of death until he's actually confronted with it for real. Then he's really afraid. But early in the movie, he's like, I think I'd like my head to be cut off. I think that'd be great.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
well,
you'll get that, buddy. You'll get that real good.
Honestly, I think there wasn't even that much of a catharsis to our villain being killed, because he seemed to enjoy it just so much, even as he's bleeding and shaking.
But he was also crying and crawling through the mud,
Yeah,
asking, is this what death is like?
I loved the contrast of, he's wearing the white robes the whole film, and this is just like covered in, mud and blood and other things that rhyme with that. And
yeah, he had a mixture of Betty's death from Kung Pao and Captain Hammer feeling pain for the first time in Dr. Horrible.
It's like, you've definitely defeated me, but this was the best day of my life.
This also was the greatest day of my life. This was amazing. That character, the one you mentioned, yes, he was a great like a samurai type, because he has that conflict, and he was a great antagonist in the film because you understood everything about him. You knew why he was doing it. He was conflicted, and it goes into your point that when you end it all, these people are all dead, and what was it for? Like, is this the end of the samurai? And we even get the text scroll as the credits are about to roll in, telling us, yeah,
2 decades later, the shogunate ended, and Japan now has government,
and that was it. And so this, They died, and what was it really for? Well, they stopped the one guy. They stopped one dude, and now we've moved on. The history keeps going forward, and they were just products of a time that no longer needed to be. And you saw that with the conflict between the two most samurai characters, with the one who's defending our villain and the one who's opposing him, where that there is a demonstration of the times have changed, where the one who's standing by the villain, the one who's doing these horrible things, he's obviously on the wrong side of history when it comes to us looking at it, and he's also morally on the wrong side. But as a character himself, he has a code, he has an honor system that has been there for hundreds of years, and you can not only sympathize with him, but you can definitely look at him as a victim as well, where you're just going, man, I feel bad for you.
A lot of Japanese works love that archetype, where it's like the noble guy on the villain side.
Oh, yes.
And clearly, yeah, it has its origins in samurai times, evidently.
And not even just that, but the characters who feel a moral as well as noble sensibility to sympathize or empathize with an inherently evil thing and wrestle with that, like in all of the old Godzilla movies where you have like the science characters or those characters who are like, Godzilla's really not that bad, like they're kind of like looking at it being like, he's just he's just a product of our times. And it's like, okay. But it works, and
Yeah.
culturally it makes a lot of sense. And he was great. But another favorite of mine that I liked as a character was, I like the duo of the one I was mentioning who was dying, and he was looking at his master getting killed as well, and they were a fun dynamic where he was constantly being like, I hope to one day repay you because I haven't done good enough, and maybe my death will be that. And even then, he's just like, no, master.
Yeah, I really want to rewatch this just so I can get those characters down pat in my head. Because on the way here, I was reading the Roger Ebert review for it, and he gave it like 3.5 out of 4. So he loved it. It was one of those ones where I didn't really read any flaws, so it's like, oh, you could have given it 4. And yeah, he talked about how like the 13 assassins are all so well defined. I'm like, oh, I really need to get that in my head.
They had that duo had the best action scene in the film for me, which is cut to a part of the village covered in swords, hundreds and hundreds of swords, and fire is everywhere. Just fire is in the center. And you know why those swords are stabbed everywhere, because they're just going to keep grabbing swords and slashing people and throwing swords.
Yes, because Ryan, you'll run out of ammo if you don't have that.
I loved that scene. It was so good. And when the master, the one who's like the biggest, meanest looking motherfucker samurai out of them all, he's slowly walking up to the Lord and his men, and he's like slashing dudes left and right, and he's just cockily being like, yeah, let's go. And then a bunch of reinforcements barge in, and he just turns around and goes, retreat, and they run away. They were a great duo. In all honesty, what was great about 13 Assassins, and yeah, you have to give it a watch again, you could see each one of the assassins being a lead in their own movie.
There were multiple characters. I'm like, oh, is this going to be our lead? Like the Hanbei, the guy on the villain side, like, oh, this guy could easily be the main character. Like, and when we were getting the flashback at the beginning where it's like, oh, I so regret asking my daughter-in-law to give him the drink or whatever it was. Like, that girl's husband, I'm like, oh, is he going to be one of the 13 assassins? Like, he's got, a motive being established here, and no, he just gets stabbed in the back.
Yeah, and it's treated with real shock. Like, oh, he got killed. When one of the first samurais die, that was a real, shocking moment too. He just gets stabbed from behind with a spear, and his death is really pathetic in a way. Like, he's just staggering and no one's really coming at him. He's just swinging his sword wildly. He has no clue what to do, and he just falls over and huddles in a ball and dies.
It's similar to the last person that dies in the film, like when the guy's walking away and the guy's like, oh, not quite dead, and just wildly swinging. And
yeah, and he just like smacks him on the back with the sword. It's like, what the hell, man? And just kills him. Yeah, I really got a lot out of this. I like period piece movies, especially ones where we get to see landscapes and how they have these people in their attire just blend into those landscapes. I really get a kick out of that in live action and in animated form. I like that a lot. So when they detoured off their path and they went through the forest and the jungle land and they bumped into your favorite assassin, the last one, and he's just stuck up
Do
in
I look
there.
like a raccoon?
Do I look? And he keeps hunting for them, and they keep being like, "No, not rabbits." And he's like, "What do you want, man? This is what I got."
There was that one scene, it was like at night in the middle of the town where like these four guys were trying to mug one of our 13 assassins, and it reminded me again of what we were talking about last week with Clint Eastwood, like just guys picking on the clearly tough guy and just getting their asses handed to them.
Oh, that was a marvel. Oh yeah, yeah, that was a good moment. Any other things you want to bring up about 13 Assassins? Any other moments? Any other character scenes? Ideas being floated here?
This was a good movie.
It was a good movie. Are you gonna go on a Takashi Miike kick now?
I really want to check out more of his films for sure, yeah.
Yeah, check out his more recent ones about Power Rangers ripoffs, whatever he's doing.
The Super Sentai films. Yeah.
I don't know what his thing is, but he just loves making movies, I guess, and he cannot be stopped. He's an absolute wild card, and I'm not too familiar with Japanese actors by any means, and I had a look at a good portion of the cast, and I think most of them I looked at have not been in things that I have seen before, but they've all had a great body of work. So I'm sure people who are a bit more familiar with Japanese actors may know them for this, or this.
Yeah, on the simple, like, hover your cursor over their names on Wikipedia thing, it like listed a bunch of things. Like I think the assassin I liked, the wild hunter guy, like it listed like 4 different things. The last one was like businessman. I'm like, oh, this guy's prolific. Yeah, there was no overlap with any of them in the voice acting industry, but a lot of them had really striking voices and vocal performance. Like I've heard vocal performances like this in like games and stuff that I've watched.
Oh, yeah. Just talking about their expressions, these actors, all of them have amazing expressions, and the voices as well. One of my favorite actors is the guy who stopped the villain at the bridge. I thought his performance was really good, just giving him this look, just this fucking, you do not cross my bridge, you killed my family last year, and I remembered that. And
I didn't happen to forget that.
I didn't happen to forget that. But that performer, for the minimal amount of time he's given, he is someone who comes in like, this is my story. And that's really felt with everyone in 13 Assassins. Everyone's playing it like, this is my story. And it adds so much gravitas to this. And I think an appeal of something like a samurai movie, modern or from the golden era of filmmaking, is there's an inherent epicness, whether it's in the scale of things, like the scale of fight scenes here, where they're running all around the town, they've got traps, they've got knickknacks hidden away, here's all these swords. That's impressive, as well as just the scale of where they're going to and from places. But with a samurai story or with a western, there's always this just certain sense of epicness, because for cinema's sake, for both Japan and for America, these were the great films that we saw at the beginning of cinema itself, of a lot of cowboy stories or samurai stories. And so when you revisit ones from that time, or when you see ones like this, which is in itself a revisit of a film from the 60s, you can just feel like, I don't know if you get this at all, but like you just feel this epic sense of scale and weight to it that I don't think some other genres have built into them the same way, because of just not just a real life cultural history for, say, samurais, but just in terms of history and cinema itself. There's just something potent about it.
Yeah, again, I want to check out more Miike films, and you mentioned him earlier. I also need to check out more Kurosawa films, because, yeah, the only one I've seen is Rashomon, which is of the same era but wasn't about samurai either. But that one's influential enough to where a storytelling style is named after it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Is Ran Kurosawa?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another
That's
one.
one of his later ones. That's one of the ones in the 80s.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
right.
Yeah. Recently, just to talk about that, Martin Scorsese has a movie coming out, and he had a quote where he was talking about, I think it was Kurosawa when he was at like an award ceremony for Ran or one of his later movies, where Kurosawa was talking about like when you reach a certain age, like, you know, he was in his 70s or 80s, there's a real inherent sadness knowing that you finally understand what to do, but you don't have enough time. And Martin Scorsese's 80 years old now, and he said in a recent interview, he's like, I never understood what he meant by that, but I've got a movie coming out. I'm 80 years old. I feel like I know exactly what I need to do now when it comes to making movies, but I just know I don't have time. I just don't have the time. Like, and it's really upsetting, but that's the nature of some artists is
it's like youth is wasted on the young, they say.
Yes, and you spend decades fine-tuning your abilities and your craft, and then once you feel like you're getting at it, you realize, wow, I'm near the end of my life itself. And both for Kurosawa and for Scorsese, in the later parts of their careers, they had trouble getting movies made. In different ways. And with Scorsese, I mean, he had to get The Irishman. Netflix had to come in, and it's like, because no one else wanted it. It's like, are you telling me Scorsese says, I'm going to make another gangster movie with Pacino and De Niro, and people are like, nah, I don't want it.
I thought you were going to bring up The Snowman.
Oh, yes, and The Snowman, of course, but... yeah, I have nothing else to say on 13 Assassins. I would be keen to see more Takashi Miike films in this vein, because Audition is a horror movie.
Yeah.
And so I've known him to be a good horror movie director or a good thriller, while this was period piece action movie, which is good too, and has its place. And I'd be keen to see more of his, I guess, action films, because he was really well done when it came to that.
I think the word to write down is jidaigeki. I don't know if that just means period piece or period piece specifically of this type of era, but I have heard that word floating around. Yeah.
Well,
jidaigeki.
I recommend 13 Assassins. It's a thumbs up from me.
I also recommend 13 Assassins, which in Japan is known as Jusannin no Shikaku.
Thank you very much for getting that up for us. Now, I am recommending the next movie for us to talk about on the podcast.
That's actually true.
That is actually true. Thank you, my servant. And
Samurai.
No.
Okay, well, now I'm a Ronin, so you can't boss me around.
I can pay you to go away. I am not going to leave Japan. My next pick is a Japanese movie also.
It's Rashomon. Oh, no.
And it's an animated film.
Uh-huh.
And it's an iconic one. It's one of the ones, but I can't remember if you've seen it before, but I feel like watching it again anyway for myself. I'm going to talk about the original Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes. Have you seen it?
I have, but I watched it with my stepbrother, so there was limited attention given to it.
Oh, boy.
I have 2 copies of it on DVD.
Yeah. Well,
for some reason.
We'll be watching that next episode, so people make sure to watch the original Ghost in the Shell. We'll be doing it in Japanese, the Japanese version. I say original because there's the American remake that's called Ghost in the Shell with ScarJo. But we're going to be watching and talking about that. It's iconic. It's available. It's out there. Give it a watch for yourself. If you've seen it before, give it a revisit. If you haven't, well, this is a great opportunity to tick that one off the list. And,
this is an opportunity for me to revisit it, yeah.
And it's pretty easily available. I know for Americans, it's on YouTube. Like, it's officially like a YouTube thing. Like, you know, YouTube has like movies and shows and stuff. So it's there. But we'll be talking about that next time on the podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in and listening to us talk over 13 Assassins. If you have any thoughts or questions or queries and or even recommendations for movies for us to cover on the podcast, we like to write those down. You can hit us up on social media. Spit and Polish Presents. We're on Facebook and Twitter. You can just follow us on there and see whatever we post. And you can email us over at spitandpolished@gmail.com.
Yeah, you can.
You can do that. Thank you again. Remember to be kind to each other, or I'll cut your head off and kick it like a soccer ball.
And I will be horrified and then help Ryan finish his ambitions.
Thank you.
Sorry, my lord.
My lord.
Waga Aruji.